It's a little scary.
What's scary?
Me?
Man, yeah. Oh man. So I don't know about you, but I'm feeling intense right now. Feeling some,
Ooh,
feeling anxious, man. Part of me is feeling anxious.
cool. What are you feeling anxious about?
I don't know. Maybe this conversation.
Now I'm anxious. I'm blaming it on you.
Let's go, bro. That's perfect. Um, oh, okay.
I'm anxious about holding my phone with my hand. I left my stands in Denmark, so I feel a little out of control right now. So it'll be a little shaky, a little
So
California earthquake action.
this works, man. This works. Well,
Cool.
yeah, man. There's been a conversation that I was looking forward to potentially having with you. Maybe this is the fourth time that I've attempted to have this conversation. So, um, but before we go into that, I was curious about kombucha, which maybe seems a little off topic. But I did this restore thing with you,
Yeah.
and there's like kombucha was on this list and it was off the list at certain points in time. So I was curious, what are the benefits or like some of the detriments of kombucha when exploring a paleo inspired nutritional perspective?
Yeah. I think as a general theme, uh, kombucha can be supportive to one's health and wellness. I think that store-bought kombucha is typically uh, pretty sugary as a theme.
Mm.
I'm not anti-sugar. I'm just saying it's pretty sugary as a theme, and uh, many people use it as a replacement for soda or for other drinks, and end up drinking quite a bit of kombucha, which, interestingly enough, from my own personal experience as well as looking at research, liquid calories, people typically don't perceive the ingestion of them. So they'll often drink a lot of liquid calorie or liquid sugar and then continue to ingest their normal amounts of food. So, interestingly enough, it could be a way that someone gains some body fat, interestingly, as a potential. Um, the other thing is that I think there's a perspective out there that kombucha is in therapeutic doses. And as far as I'm aware, it's not. The doses aren't that high. So it's not really a therapeutic drink.
Mm.
Um, and the probiotics in there are transient, which are also supportive to the gut, to the immune system, to um, glucose regulation, and a multitude of other aspects. In Restore, I don't believe it was out, but there was questions that people asked about, can they have it?
Hmm.
And in Restore, you could have it, um, but in moderation, so maybe one serving a day. The other thing
Mm.
with kombucha is that the bacteria strains in kombucha tend to be lactic acid producing. Is it lactic acid? I'll have to check on that. I haven't. I haven't been looking into. I haven't been working on food stuff for a long time. I'm way deeper in mental and emotional work. But is it lactic acid producing bacteria? I believe it is. I'll have to post under here if that's it. But many people have an overabundance of that, and that can also cause issues in the gut. So, yeah, I think that's my quick synopsis on kombucha. I mean, I can
Okay.
give you my own personal experience too with it. Is there's some really good tasting kombucha out there. I'll drink quarts of it in a day, easy. So that's me.
Yeah. It's it's been like 2 months since I've had any kombucha, just
Mm,
because there was so much sugar in it, and I was being
mm,
mindful of sugar consumption and rewarding foods.
yeah,
And I think it's my adipostat. Is
yeah,
that been trying to
mm,
lower my adipostat? I think that's
yeah,
right.
yeah. You look a little obese. I mean, it's a little out of control.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm getting angry.
Perfect. We're here to
Oh,
feel, JPD. We're here to feel.
thank you, Jator. Um, and on that note, um, I'm curious about anger,
Mm,
and your perspective on anger, frustration, um, rage. If you have a process
mm,
personally for you with anger, if someone gets you angry, do you go into like a, maybe not this analytical, but like a three-step process? Let me see what
mm.
this person represents to me, what's showing up with me with the anger, what's my experience, how young do I feel? And then after all of these steps, is there a point of when, if the anger gets so deep that you actually draw clear boundaries? And
I'm
would you
angry
ever
right now.
resort to clear?
All the noise in the background's making me angry.
I know. I have a roommate, man. I'm a fucking vagabond, bro. I fucking nomad it up. I have no control over my life. I eat with the same spoon for the last 2 years because it gives me a sense of purpose and meaning and familiarity. That was not a joke, bro. Bamboo spoon fork. Uh,
I really enjoy what you shared. I enjoy what I heard of some potential processes around navigating our anger and our experience of it. And I think those would all be useful tools for sure. I, you know, I'm going to kind of go in a different direction as usual. Um, when I look back at my experience of anger and processing of it, and the experience that I have of other people's anger, when I started to really dive into, well, the undercurrents of why people were angry or why I was angry, um, then it was really helpful for me to understand how to be present in the presence of anger. And if we look at, as I'm aware, the undercurrents of anger are fear and shame. It's kind of an adult way to express fear or shame. You imagine we're driving in a car and someone cuts us off, and let's just say we get pissed and we drive up next to that person and are cursing and screaming at them, right? So we're pissed off, we're angry.
hmm.
What if, when we got cut off, we noticed our anger and noticed what was underneath our anger was a sense of fear? Whew, man, that was close. I got scared. And then we pulled up next to that person and said, man, I got really scared. You almost hit me. Are you okay? What's going on? It's a very different expression, but my experience of us as children and my clients and myself is that we become afraid of our fear and we become ashamed of our shame, and we start to use anger as a control mechanism to express our fear or shame. Anger can be a very controlling emotion. Imagine the last time you were in the presence of someone who was angry. My guess is a part of you got scared. My guess is a part of you felt a need to walk on eggshells. My guess is a part of you went into reactive behavior, just like I do. Flight, fight, freeze, or facade. And so if we can look at anger from that perspective and start to say, okay, well, what's underneath it? Why is this person angry? Why am I angry? Okay, what if there's a sense of fear or shame? What am I afraid of? What am I ashamed of? What's coming up for me? So that, for me, once I gain that understanding of anger, that's one dissolvement or loosening of one thread of that angry sweater, right? Let's say there's lots of threads to this sweater.
Mm-hmm.
Another thread of that sweater is I'm afraid of my own anger. So if I'm afraid of my own anger, interestingly, I become afraid of other people's anger, and I get angry about their anger. But that anger typically isn't expressed, it's swallowed. As a general theme, swallowed anger ends up looking like depression, depressing that anger and swallowing it and compressing it down. And so many people have a fear of their own anger. For many years, and I'd say in some regard, still in part, I have some sense of fear of my own anger. Why do I have a sense of fear of my own anger in some parts? Because there's been moments in my life when I was younger that I let that anger out, maybe in very dysfunctional ways, maybe in physically violent ways, maybe in emotionally violent ways, maybe in mentally violent ways. I've used anger, and I've seen many people use anger for control, for pedestaling, for self-righteousness, and underneath that to hide a sense of insecurity and or fear and shame. Consider all that. And then lastly, I think, not lastly because there's a lot, but another piece that I think is profound for me is because so many of us hold a sense of fear about our anger and we hide our anger. Expressing our anger to someone that we're emotionally attached to or emotionally involved with, family, friends, significant other, etc., can actually be an extreme act of vulnerability and intimacy. It's a paradox. And I'll use an example. You and I in the past have had some stuff come up around, missing, we'll set up sessions and sometimes it'll, not coaching sessions, let's be clear, but IG sessions
Yeah.
or whatnot, right? And let's say, I remember there was some time that you felt anger about it and we talked about it. For me, you expressing your anger actually was one of the most respectful things you could ever do. It meant that you trust yourself enough in my presence that you're willing to be honest with your anger with me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a greater form of respect than someone being honest, especially around emotions that they're afraid to be honest about. Many of us mask those, in quotes, negative emotions, anger being one of them. And so my personal experience when someone expresses anger, I can change that experience into, wow, what a vulnerable expression that is.
Mm-hmm.
And it can actually be a tremendous amount of intimacy if you're willing to see it that way. So those would be some things that I would, that has dissolved, I guess, in part, my fear of anger.
Mm-hmm.
And so now in my own life, as an example that I just shared on IG the other day, my dad was angry at me. I'm using that language purposefully, and was yelling at me about something he was really angry about. And instead of defending and proving back with anger, I sat in the presence of his anger and really tried to hear what he was sharing. What was he afraid of? What was he ashamed of? What was really going on in his heart? And to recognize how much he must trust himself in my presence to be willing to get angry with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I could navigate that situation in a very different way rather than, proving and defend it. I could acknowledge and I could see and I could hear and I could thank him for, wow, being honest enough to tell me how angry he is, which opened up a whole other conversation to us connecting, for me, our hearts and our minds to understand each other in a very different way.
Do you
Did I
think that
answer your
there?
question?
No.
Perfect.
But that's no. Um, shades of gray. Shades of gray.
Hmm.
Um, I'm
Do you want to?
curious
Do you
if
want the 3-step process?
no. I mean, everyone's different. I'm. Do you think that anger arises out of a lack of boundaries or boundaries being crossed, or that it can?
I think it can. I guess my experience is that anger often can be from a place of lack of representing your healthy limits and boundaries. Boundaries get crossed, but not many people represent what their boundaries are. So, as an example, right? Yes, I live in Denmark, and Denmark as a country is very clear on their healthy limits and boundaries around citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
Extremely clear about it. I really appreciate that, even though those rules don't help me. They don't work to my benefit. In fact, they work opposite of what parts of me desire to live in Denmark. Um, but I appreciate so much that they represent their healthy limits and boundaries up front. It actually reduces my ability to get angry at them if I'm willing to see it that way, because they're representing their limits and boundaries. So I have an understanding already of where they're at. Now, some people might get angry about their healthy limits and boundaries or their values. And then what you're getting angry at is essentially that their limits and boundaries and their values don't match yours. And you feel some sense of arrogance or self righteousness that your values, your limits and boundaries are the right ones. Why aren't they being like I want them to be? Interesting, at another level, you might actually feel some very deep rooted shame about not being enough to change their values. I'm not
Mm,
enough for Denmark to want me. Now this is like not surface level conscious, thought. This is playing out in the background at often a very deep level that um, we have a very hard time seeing or admitting or considering.
Right.
So yeah, um, in relationship or partnership, uh, a lot of anger stems from many people not having deep dialogue around what their values are before getting into a relationship or partnership. And then boundaries and limits get crossed, but nothing's ever been talked to about before that. So, in that context, we do a lot of assumption and not a whole lot of communication.
Yeah.
And when we assume without communication, when things get crossed, we get angry because we don't know how to say we're afraid or ashamed.
Yeah. Let me see if I could work on this.
Hold on 1 second. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know you were why I thought it was I thought it was a conversation between you two. Definitely let me do it after. Thanks, bro.
I was really hopeful there was going to be a fight that breaks out like, on the camera, like a fist fight. I was like, oh, this is awesome. But I mean,
Um,
that's a beautiful example, right? For me,
mhm.
and I'm going to make some assumptions here.
Yeah.
What just happened? Well, uh, and I don't know how you're feeling, but what's interesting is there, as far as I could pick up, there was no conversation about what was going on. There was no healthy limit and boundary set. And he came in without knowing any healthy limit and boundary that was, hey, I'm having this live.
Hmm.
So he doesn't know. He's oblivious. He can't read minds, apparently. Neither can I. And I'm guessing maybe some part of you felt a sense of anger. I know I did. What the fuck, man? And so underneath that is also this sense of fear. Ah, man, what are people going to think? This is so unprofessional. What the hell is going on here? Why am I doing this talk? And then maybe there's some underlying sense of shame. Wow, how am I experiencing myself right now about what's going on?
Mm. And using this example that just happened,
Mm.
my roommate, I didn't clearly communicate that I was shooting a live with you. He thought I was just having a conversation, so he was having a conversation, starting to cook dinner. He just got done working out. He's hungry. Aside from this, does a part of you feel that this is generally true in most every situation? I know it's kind of like trying to say like all the time that there's a recent situation where I got really angry with a landlord who was also a roommate,
Mm.
and I invested hours and hours of my time into having conversations and trying to reach some type of understanding with this individual. And a part of me felt like it never happened. And the only time where it was starting to be understood was when I got angry. And he's like, I don't know why you're getting so angry. It was like he was oblivious to what was my experience like.
Mm.
And so is it, at one level is this just my self-righteousness and him not coming to my side and supporting me and me just getting more and more angry for not being heard?
I love when people answer their own questions with beautiful answers. What did it feel like to not be heard?
Felt horrible. I felt like my boundaries were always being crossed.
Yeah, I felt like my boundaries were being crossed. I felt afraid.
And so all the time, anger.
Okay, I think there's not,
There's
from
shades
my
of gray.
perspective, there's a light and a shadow side to anger, right?
Right.
So
And this
you
is what I'm
also got
curious about too.
you also got to, at least in my perspective, maybe light and shadow is not really the right language for me. So let's just say positive and negative side of anger.
Hmm.
Um, what you noticed, maybe, you weren't being heard, you got angry, and that's how you got heard. So anger became a way to control the situation. I feel in control now because now I perceive I'm being heard. So we, as adults, we use anger to feel a sense of control in environments in which we feel out of control. Go on social media and go. Chris Kresser just did a post today on IG about what's happening in the United States in terms of COVID, and let's just say a generally conventional narrative he's sharing. Just scroll down through the thread and see how much anger is in that thread, how much attack is at Chris. It's not really about Chris. It's not really about his perspective. It's about feeling a sense of I'm out of control and I need to create a sense of control by attacking. So I feel heard.
Mm.
So adults use anger to feel safe, protected, and in control in environments in which we feel unsafe, unprotected, and out of control.
I'm curious, your perspective.
Me too.
What about in a case where someone may have been suppressing their anger? They've been brought up in a way where anger is bad. They're taught to be a good little boy or a good little girl. Don't get angry.
I love
And
it now. We're getting
and
good,
and
deep.
they call their anger a dark passenger. They put it in a cage in a deep dark place inside of them.
Mm.
They go to love and light, positive vibes. I don't feel anger. I don't get angry.
Mm. Is there a question?
um,
Sounds pretty scary to me.
yeah, so I'm just, what happens in this type of situation to their anger? Obviously, they still feel anger.
Yeah, well, I'll ask you a question.
Mhm.
Um, when you notice that you suppress one of your emotions, what does that feel like to you?
Uh, Feels horrible. A part of me feels
Feel
horrible. It feels
feels
suppressive. It's constrictive.
okay. So
Constrictive.
yeah, suppressive, constrictive. What do you think happens to your body when you're feeling constrictive and suppressive?
Probably gets really tight.
Yeah. What do you think happens when it gets really tight and blood flow slows down, or metabolic waste gets stuck, or nutrients don't flow as readily to different parts of your body? What do you think happens then?
Dis-ease and dysfunction.
So, are you saying so beautifully that when we swallow our anger, even if we cover it up with love and light, there's a potential for dis-ease and dysfunction?
Yes. But part of me wants to be like, gotcha. So where's the healthy expression of the anger? if it's not in this fiery, flame-throwing, Hyrukin type of expression?
Ooh, it can be. And it can be like this. Let's demonstrate.
Okay.
Yeah. I think for me, one of the signs and symbols is being very cautious of your blame and shame language. So if we were in a fight, I wouldn't say I'm angry at you.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say I'm feeling angry. And that's mine to own, not yours to fix. And I'm not really clear in this moment what I'm feeling so angry about. But I feel that I'm reactive, I'm angry, I want to lash out, I want to attack you. And is it okay if we pause this conversation right now so I can come back to it? Very different expression.
Mm-hmm.
The language of ownership. I feel angry, and owning that anger is our responsibility, not the other person's. I'm not angry at you. Typically, I'm angry at myself for not representing my healthy limits and boundaries. And, or, interestingly enough, I'm angry at myself for not listening to my instinct or my intuition about the situation. I don't believe personally that any of us ever don't know everything that's going on. Weird statement.
Yeah.
What I do believe is that because of our fear and shame about what our intuition represents to us, mystery often, and our fear and shame or how we experienced ourselves to be feared and shamed as children about our imagination, curiosity, mystery, etc., we often hide from our own intuition. So we're getting intuitive hits all the time that's informing us about the in quote unquote truth of a situation, and we don't hear it or we deflect from it. And then lines get crossed and we want to blame the other person. The danger here often is that once maybe we come to that as a part realization, I'm responsible. The dangerous piece that a lot of people do then, which gets shaky, is that many people then take that criticism and blame and shame and then project it inwardly rather than integrating, processing, and exploring with mystery and childlike playfulness what might be going on underneath the surface. It's one of the kind of catch 22s in my experience of self work. It can become a place where instead of projecting outwardly our shame and blame, we move to inward shame and blame. And then that becomes another sticking point that we get stuck at.
Mm-hmm.
It's more so for me looking at where did I learn to discount my intuition to survive in the environment I was raised, so that I can learn to acknowledge, hear, see, be compassionate and kind to myself rather than to take that criticism, shame, and blame and project it inwardly. And many of us do this in different ways. Many of us are, project outwardly shame and blame, and many of us project inwardly shame or blame. And it bounces around all the time, right? These are themes. As a general theme, I probably, at this point in my life, probably internally project more of my shame and blame, which I have to notice, not have to. I invite myself to notice. It's why I have "Be Kind" tattooed on my hands.
Mm-hmm.
I have that tattooed on my hands so that my peripheral vision can pick up the subconscious reminder to notice what I don't typically notice when I'm beating myself up.
Mm.
So it's very confusing, because we want to blame the outside world for our pain. And I get it. Parts of me do too. I'd much rather blame you or blame your roommate. What a jerk. So unevolved, not paying any attention to what's going on, not present. I mean, there's parts of me that want to do that for sure. And I have to like laugh and say, oh, that's pretty interesting how critical that part of me is. And wow, what's really going on there? Okay, well, yeah, I felt out of control. I felt interrupted. What I'm saying is so important, JPD. What the hell is this guy interrupting me for?
Mm-hmm.
This is serious business. And then I'm part of me is getting upset at you, want to blame you. Like, this guy didn't even set this thing up right. He's just in some living room somewhere. I mean, I could go on and on with my blame and shame. But I get to watch that and say, well, what's that really about? It's about my own fear and shame about what this situation represents to me. And that's okay. And wow, I feel really out of control right now. And that's okay too. Let's carry on.
Mm. Um,
I
how do,
love, can I draft
yeah,
off one other thing that you
yeah,
said too? It was a beautiful point for me as well. That you felt heard, and maybe he did hear you when you got angry. Um, that, in my perspective, could have also been a moment of meeting someone where they're at, or waking someone up. There's a saying in, I think it's psychology, it often takes trauma to wake us up out of trauma. So when you're having this conversation with this guy, and maybe you're coming at it in the way that you were, he may have been experiencing some fear and or shame, and he may have went into a hypnotic stupor or reactive pattern that he has. Maybe his pattern is deer in the headlights, right? To freeze or not to hear what's
mm,
going on. And by you getting angry, it might have sparked him to awareness. Oh shit, there's actually something going on here. It's very strange. It's very strange to say that. Why is it strange? It's strange for me because many people in my experience, and myself included, don't often realize how often we are in a complete hypnotic stupor and are completely unpresent to anything that's going on. I get this question a lot. And I don't know why I get this question a lot, but it's fun to answer. Jator, you're a pretty aware guy. What do you think your awareness is? Like, how much of you is aware? 0 to 100, 100% being, fully, whatever that means, fully aware. And my answer is typically, I'm probably aware 0.0000001% of the time.
hmm.
And I experience myself to be a pretty aware person.
Yeah.
We have so many subconscious, unconscious patternings that it takes a lot of compassion, empathy, time, presence, awareness, work, playfulness to, if this is the case with this guy, snap out of our hypnotic stupors. I've been in more coaching sessions than I can count where I've asked a simple question. Did you hear what you just said? No. So people, most of us, inclusive of myself, often are just functioning on habitual pattern.
Mm.
So that anger that you expressed might have woke him up out of that habitual pattern to then have a conversation. It's really interesting. And then there'll be others. I can think of an ex-partner of mine. It made her more angry when I would try to, dialogue with these things from a compassionate place. My sense and guess would be she felt very out of control. She wanted to fight, is words I've heard. She wanted that kind of fire. Many of us as children experience connection through pain, fire, anger, fear, resentment. And so we'll often look for that in our lives to recreate it, to feel a sense of love. Love just simply being attention.
Mm-hmm.
So for her, it actually meant I loved her if I was willing to fight with her.
Right.
Dysfunctionally, to blame and shame each other, felt uncomfortably comfortable for her.
Mm.
So there'd be times where I'd try it on for fun and just get fucking angry and blame and shame her and work miracles. And then there came a point in our relationship where that isn't how I personally want to function. And it's okay that she does. I'm not criticizing that way of navigating life. It's simply not the way that I want to navigate it. And in that partnership, I asked her, I said, my experience of our communication feels hurtful and painful to me. And I'm guessing that it can feel hurtful and painful to you.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have any desire to work on how we communicate with each other so that we can understand each other and not fight, but change how we fight? No, I don't want to do that. Okay. And then the healthy limit and boundary that she had, I had to then check in with my limits and boundaries and make a decision on if that was a relationship or partnership that I wanted to stay in.
Mm-hmm. From a compassionate place for yourself and also for a part of her.
Yeah. I'm not going to keep myself in a situation in which I feel a constant sense of stress or fear.
Mm-hmm. Does a part of you believe that there are genuinely, like, maybe bad people or people who would use control or manipulation, seduction, kind of like dark Jedi tricks to control people?
That's a great question. Yeah, I'd ask us all to go look in the mirror and see that person. I wouldn't frame it in bad. I wouldn't say it's bad. I would say, yeah, that sounds like every single human I've ever met, inclusive of myself.
Mm.
I mean, an interesting question is, can you speak words without the intent to seduce?
Regardless of putting a light or a dark side to it.
Can you speak words without the intention to seduce? I mean, it's a fucking good question, man.
It's similar to a conversation I was having with someone I'm in a relationship with.
Mm.
It's like we're kind of always seducing each other to do certain things, but it's in a light component. when you're being nice to someone. Isn't that just a high
Maybe.
level of manipulation? Maybe. I'll buy you gifts. I'll speak your love language. All to seduce and manipulate you to love me.
Oh, well said. Until that's not enough.
Well, yeah, right. Because it can never be enough.
Yeah. So I think at some level we're all seductive, we're all manipulative, we all have agenda, we all have some level of expectation. We move from obligation quite often, and that's not what I'm saying here. Is not a criticism or a bad thing. That's I think sometimes people framework it in that way because we framework a lot of things in right or wrong. What
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying is, it's for me, they're things just to notice about ourselves and to get curious about. Ooh, wow, that's really interesting. Um, why did I do that? Where did that come from?
Right.
I'm curious about that. But yeah, I'm not a person who believes in good or evil. I don't think there's any such thing. I think that's perception.
Good or evil. What about emotion then? Because at one level, a part of me thinks that if there's no uh, good or evil, then what about emotions that, like, couldn't I just live a banal life of kind of no emotion? Where there's like,
You could.
if you take away the association of emotion being good or evil,
Uh,
if that makes sense.
can you banal life? Can you? I don't know what that word means.
So if I, banal is just like ordinary, basic.
Mm,
There's, it's like the, like, how are you? Just, it's just a banal question to ask because it's so
mm.
ordinary. It's so basic.
So are you saying that if one lives a banal life, there's a good or bad aspect to that?
I think, I think what I'm trying to discover or explore with you, Jator, is if if there's no good or evil, does that reduce? Is that in the same vein as right or wrong, or good emotions and bad emotions?
Mm,
Do all those things all exist in the same paradox?
mm.
And then how does that go into like enjoyment of life, or is enjoyment of life just another control drama?
Yeah.
Don't agree. No, don't agree with me. Don't break my control
don't
drama.
don't fucking agree with that, Jator. Yeah, I mean, good and evil from my perspective, right? I can only speak to my perspective. So
Right,
good
right.
and
From your
evil,
perspective.
or bad and evil, those are judgments based on values. Typically, the way that we judge good and evil is based on the values that we were raised with in our family of origin, and then from school and our culture and how we see things, right? There's things in the United States that are considered good that in other states are considered, or other countries, excuse me, are considered evil. So those are perceptions and value sets. Right and wrong. Um, I was just chatting with my mom about this the other day. I'm here in California, staying at my parents' house, and my mom's a therapist, and we're having some really cool conversations. And I asked her, Mom, how many people get into right or wrong fights, couple fights, around which way the toilet paper should be rolled? It sounds funny, but literally people get divorces over this type of shit. And that's based on a value set that you were taught. And it's not actually the toilet paper roll. It's what that represents to us, and a lack of control, and we think we're right and the other way is wrong. It's not even a place that becomes unquestioned and unquestionable.
Mm.
And so if you look at a lot of, in my experience, self-help, new age stuff, a lot of it is driven by people thinking there's something wrong with them and there's something to be fixed. That going into self-help with that perspective is eliciting, you're moving into self-help with a perspective of fear and shame.
Versus curiosity and play or innocence.
Yeah. And exploration. There's something wrong with me, something to be fixed. So if we have, what was the word, banal?
Yeah.
Yeah. So many, you'll see many things on social media or advertisements or whatnot. You're not living your best life. You should be better. You shouldn't be banal. You should be what I am. I just hear people pushing their agenda and their values and saying, I'm living the right life, and you're not living the right life because you're not living the life that I'm living.
Mm-hmm.
I just disagree. I don't think it's a possibility to not be on purpose.
Right.
And so if I hold that framework, then I can hold the framework of each of us is exactly where we're at. And each of us are navigating our emotions, our right and wrongness, our good and evil perspectives in the best way that we can in that moment.
Mm.
When I look at, maybe in quotes, all the work I've done, at the end of the day, what's the biggest difference for me from my own experience of myself and who I was maybe 15 years ago is maybe I moved through life with a little bit more grace and compassion for myself. And therefore I can move with a little bit more grace and compassion for others. Which also means if you need to live a banal life, that's fucking cool.
Mm.
Or if I do, that's okay too. I don't choose to because, that's a good question. Why don't I? Chasing things for me, and I do mean chasing, is entertaining. I'm entertained. I'm entertained by experience and by challenge and by new places and new things. It's entertaining,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think it's any better than anyone else.
Yeah.
Does that kind of answer it?
Yeah. Yeah. My favorite part of that, there's a lot of things that I enjoyed, but you had this moment where you're like, that's a good question. That you told yourself. You're like, why do I do that?
Why
I was
do
like,
I do that? Hmm.
hmm.
So
Wow.
like I come like from a place of, I really want to understand you and your perspective. So when I come from that place, like when we had some challenges with us, like, one, you bringing the challenge up was beautiful for me. And two, because it's beautiful for me, I don't need to push back against it. I want to understand it. Wow, yeah, I could see that. And yeah, I could see why you'd feel that way. And I think maybe I'd feel that way too, or I wouldn't feel that way, but I can totally see why you would. Um, I want to move from a place of understanding myself and others, and that feels more. I can connect then because I get to learn about myself through you.
Mm-hmm.
and your experiences of life. And you shine a lot of light in areas of my own room that's blacked out that I wouldn't be able to see unless I interacted with you. And I know that I can see more if I invite more of you in. Wow. Okay, cool. Let me learn about this. God, Jator, you're such a jerk. You flaked 10 times. Am I a jerk? I flaked 10 times. Actually, yes, I'm a jerk. I flaked 10 times. I got it. It's true. And I notice it. And thank you for bringing it up. It's something I want to look at because maybe it's not how I want to navigate life. Or, hey, thanks for bringing it up. And right now, yeah, that's how I navigate life.
Mm. Um, to be frank, there is a time where Jator would put all of his years of aggressive hockey playing or like his strength to defend himself if there was a situation. Like
Ooh.
if someone you love and you care about is being attacked,
And now
someone
we're
like
talking about like some physical
personal
stuff.
personal things like a little lady in your life that you care about is being attacked by somebody else. This would be a different case where you wouldn't. How would you respond to this in imagination, curiously?
Yeah, it's a great question. Are we talking about, okay, whether we're talking about physical or we're talking about emotional or we're talking about mental? First and foremost, I would just bluntly say, if you come into my house uninvited, you're gonna catch something. So let's just be clear about
Okay,
that.
okay. I've since I've been exploring anger, I've met some amazing people. I've been playing with this shit, and I'm like, where the fuck is your boundary? Like,
Yeah,
it seems to be like the upper limitations. Like 95%, I'm cool, but then there's
yeah.
5%.
You are going to catch Oakland Jator very quickly.
Okay.
Um, on the ice, as an example, too, I've reduced that, but it's another place that you will catch a very different version of Jator. Ice hockey is it, 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 it's what's that? It's gladiators. It's not a place to be responsive. It's a place to be reactive. Um,
Mm.
I could get killed if I'm being responsive. Should I skate this way or that way? No, 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 no. That's not going to work here. You're going to die. So it's survival in hockey.
Mm.
Um, if me and you are walking down the street and, somebody was, getting, I don't know, louder in your face or in my face, like for sure I'm going to represent myself. I will do my best to dissolve the situation without that. And if that also requires potentially just walking away, I will do that too.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but there is, for me, a time and place for, hell yeah, physicality. And I'll be very honest. It's one of the attractive aspects of the USA right now is that I can own a gun. And there are some interesting things going on in the world now that I'll be very frank. Being trained in use of a gun and protecting my family and that is hell yeah. Um, so there is that boundary for sure. Um, it's kind of in the moment making choices around what those boundaries are and being mindful of the situation and also shit man benefits and consequences of that type of action.
Mm-hmm.
I've made those decisions before and ended up in situations that were life threatening or caused life to be ended. And those aren't situations I particularly want to be in. So I'm also very mindful as to where I insert myself in life.
Mm.
So I mean, it boils down to this old saying that I think is very cliche, but I think it speaks volumes. Uh, don't go into the kitchen if you don't want to get hot. So, like, if all of this rally stuff that was happening in protests, right, that were happening here in the U.S., hey, do your thing. If you go to that, there's going to be benefits and consequences of that behavior, not bad or good. There's going to be outcomes, and you're putting yourself in an environment in which have some pretty good likelihood of outcomes that might end in some physicality. Are you prepared to do that? Then yay for you.
Hmm. Do you think that this ties into? I've heard I've heard you reference. I think I read it actually about being a holistic alpha male,
Mm,
someone who's like or a heart-centered alpha male, someone who's in tune with their emotions and
mm.
but shredded and balanced. Um, so does this align with that value for you?
Yeah, for me it does, for sure. I mean, I would be lying to you if I didn't say there's a there's a full blown lion in here.
Right.
Yeah. Um, but that lion doesn't need to always be out of the cage. The cage is always open. That's the difference.
Right.
It's not locked away. It's always open. It's knowing when to use that and when not to. For me,
Wow.
and I think that that alpha male doesn't need to be violent. It can be violence. It can be physicality. It can also be the fortitude and the potent direction of representing what your healthy limits and boundaries are. There are lines that I won't cross in certain situations, and that will not be crossed. And representing that, I think, is actually a very beautiful alpha male or alpha female thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Represent yourself. Don't give your ass away. Notice when you do. Set your healthy limits and boundaries. Reduce your fear of losing others because of who you are. I think that's some very potent medicine for many of us, inclusive of myself.
Mm-hmm. Reppy's another way. Would you call this assertiveness? At some
Yeah, I love that assertiveness. I love that word.
okay.
Yeah.
To assert that this is your boundary,
Mm,
to hold your ground here.
yeah. And assertiveness is for me different than stubbornness. Stubbornness is like being presented with something that maybe actually has some like real legitimacy to it, but you're so stubborn you just keep pushing back on it.
Mm-hmm.
Assertiveness can be like, let's say it's a perspective. It's like show me the money. Show me, let's dialogue, let's dance. Let me hear your argument. Let me hear your perspective. I want to. Um, and if I'm unconvinced, asserting my, yeah, this is how I feel. This is how I remain.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Um, Is there anything else you'd like want to add into this kind of cake of anger that we've been exploring?
Anger, cake, kombucha, cake.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that my perspective on this is in part like becoming a powerful, thoughtful communicator. I don't think has to also come with being docile. I don't agree with that perspective.
Mm.
I think it can still be strong and grounded and even forceful and powerful. It's just clear and intentional um, and with owning one's perspective. And I think at some point in my journey, I thought spirituality was about being a step rug. Everything's okay, and each their own, and those all might be, very high level truths. They might be, but I also have opinion, and I also have perspective, and I also have limits and boundaries, and I also have emotion and feeling, and I want to represent those things, and I want to be in touch with that. I don't want to bypass everything. For me, that feels like bypassing life. I've often questioned this idea of if if we all do as the story goes, um, come from one, and there is no experience in this place that we all come from. Source, great spirit, whatever you want to call it. If that's true, and that experience there is no experience because there's no relativity, at least as I understand it, then what the hell you want to come here for and not have experience and not have emotion and not express and not experience? I mean, I just don't get it.
Mm.
For me, it's more about, can you do all that but own it? Can you own that you're responsible for your feelings? Can you own that you're
Mm.
responsible for your emotions? Can you own that you're responsible for your perspectives and perceptions and projections and opinions? Can you own that most of us are still entrenched in family values that we're unaware of, that probably aren't even our own? Can you own that most of us are adults, are children dressed up in adult suits? Can you own the courageousness to explore yourself with mystery and playfulness and vibrancy, rather than the heaviness and pain of exploring yourself with fear and shame?
Mm.
It's a good Tuesday night, man. Good Tuesday night.
I put some judgment on it. um, yeah, well, thank you, Jator. I appreciate your time and um, your challenging perspectives, because a part of me wanted to blame my experience on somebody else and
Mm.
give that part of me away. And um, I'm grateful to be able to share in conversation. And
Mm.
I think Paul once said that all consciousness wants is to recognize itself.
Mm.
And I don't know if he
I
said
love
this.
I love that consciousness wants something. Well, that's cool.
Yes, I don't know. It sounded cool. I thought it was a cool way of saying like I enjoyed this. Like my conscious enjoyed riffing with your conscious. It was at a very human level.
I enjoy my experience of you as well, brother. And these are always fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, thanks for inviting me on, and look forward to the next time.
Yeah, likewise, brother.
All right, my friend.
Ciao.
Late.